Hello, everybody. This is Doug Morris, the Sharesight CEO. Thank you so much for joining us. Anything I show you today shouldn't be thought of as financial advice. We are just a technology company at Sharesight. We do not have an AFSL. So if you have any questions about investing or what you should do, buying or selling or tax strategies or anything like that, please do contact a qualified professional. I guess the overarching title of this presentation today will be on how to become an informed investor. And what I've done is I've taken my real Sharesight account and I've actually just made some slight modifications to the holdings and some of the valuations of the holdings as well, just to kind of sort of bring to you a proxy, but a relatively realistic proxy as to how I invest and how I use the product. Um, we think that our whole mission at Sharesight is to give you visibility across your holdings and your performance, and also help you on the tax. And so we think that being an informed investor over the long term, and especially in these sort of volatile markets, is a really necessary thing to become a better investor. Um, so let me just begin by talking about how I use Sharesight from kind of an overarching structural standpoint. Depending on what plan type you've signed up for, we have a range of plan options from free up to the expert plan. And each one comes with it a different amount of portfolios you can track and different feature sets. What I'm using today is our expert plan, which allows me to track 5 portfolios with unlimited holdings. And if I open up the portfolio drop-down list here, you'll see the portfolios that I'm tracking. You'll see portfolios that have been shared with me, and you'll also see what we call consolidated views, which I'll touch on toward the end of my presentation. So we always advise our user base to structure the portfolios in Sharesight just as they would their tax entities. Because whilst you might want to look at performance across the entirety of your holdings, to get the most out of the product, you'll want to use the tax reports too. And so if you maintain a correlation between how your assets are structured from a tax perspective and how you set up those portfolios, that's probably the best way to go inside of Sharesight. But with that said, you can set this up in any way that you choose. You can have multiple brokers feeding trades into one portfolio. You can separate by broker. And you can also use any portfolio slots available to you as sort of what if or watch list scenarios as well. So you'll see in this case, I've got a watch list that I built some time ago on Australian housing. I was sort of in the market. My family and I were to buy a house, and I was having a look at some of the listed companies with exposures to the market, trying to time the market. So that's why I built that watch list there. But just in my case, I'm pretty much kind of your typical core satellite type investor. I'm a value investor. I'm a buy and hold investor. I like value companies. Before becoming CEO of Sharesight, I worked at Morningstar, the investment research house, for about 10 years in the States, hence my accent, and in Sydney. So I was really kind of sort of schooled in the value investing methodology. So it is important to kind of to think about how you structure your portfolios, because once you get started, you want to spend some time and effort maintaining them as well. And just on that, if you're new to Sharesight, I'll cover some quick tips on how to get set up. If you're already using the product, you may know this, but hopefully you'll pick up something along the way as well. To begin with Sharesight, you'll be prompted to set up your history if you'd like. Now, you can do that in several ways. You can manually add a trade to the product, which is quite straightforward. You can import from a broker. So we have connections with most of the major online and full service brokers where we'll import your trading history. Or if you've maintained your spreadsheet, as many of us have for a long time, you can import that into the product as well. And you can get started either by importing your trading history. We have data stretching back about 20 years. So that means if you put a purchase in for, say, Telstra from 2008, we will then populate all of the performance and the dividends from that point going forward. Or, and this is true for any of you who have a lot of holdings and a lot of history, you can also use what we call an opening balance, which basically for most of us would be, say, okay, at 1 July of 2019, I'll start my portfolio there. And then that allows me to have a nice sort of clean slate and track it going forward from there. So a couple of options just to kind of highlight those that you'll be prompted to use when you sign up, or you can find at any time in this menu over here. So that gets the history into the product. And the last point that I'll make on maintaining the portfolio is within this integrations tab. Um, if you navigate to broker email import, this is something we're renaming to just trade confirmations, which we think is a bit more straightforward in the near future. We have a feature that's really slick. Once you make a trade with a broker, Sharesight can be sent your contract notes, which means your portfolio will be updated automatically. And it takes about 90 seconds. So it's a relatively real time process from when the trade is settled, the contract note is generated, the contract note is sent to Sharesight, and your portfolio is updated for you, even if you're not logged into the product. And to get this going, if you just enable this feature, you'll be given an email address that you then take to your broker and you add it to your list of email addresses to use for trade confirmations. They often give you 3 or 5 or even more slots for emails. Just add the Sharesight address to that, and everything will be set up on your behalf going forward. So just a couple of tips there on account structuring and how to set up your portfolios. Right. Okay. So into the actual portfolio itself. If you could draw your attention to the chart here, this is just the value of the portfolio, which is useful. We all want to see what the portfolio is worth and what it's done over time. In this case, I'm going back to the since first purchase date, which in this case was 2013. But the value chart is subject to money you've taken out of your portfolio from sales and money you've added to the portfolio by purchasing new stocks. So it's not necessarily a reflection of your performance if you're buying and selling over the course of time, right? So that's why what I like to do is I like to just open this drop down here, and I typically only use the performance index chart. Now, just a couple of notes on our performance methodology. So Sharesight uses a money-weighted annualized return methodology, right? So what that means, let me just to clean this up a bit, I'm just going to say do not group. So we have one nice clean line for my performance going back 7 years, right? So what this means, our methodology, it basically sets the beginning and the ending value of the portfolio the same. So it removes cash in and cash out of the portfolio, and it shows you on an annualized basis how you performed. And we like annualization because, as sort of creatures of the Western world, we think in annualized terms, right? We get paid an annual salary. We think about our annual household budgets. We think about annual school fees. We think about annual holidays, all the rest. It stands to reason, at least in our opinion, that you should track your portfolio in the same terms, right? And a final note here, just above the fold, this drop down here, this time drop down, this will modify all of the calculations that follow on most of the pages and reports in Sharesight. And so I bring that up because often people ask us, how have you arrived at this number? Or it looks like something is a bit amiss here. 9 times out of 10, it's because the date range has changed inadvertently, or it's reset itself, and you're just not quite sure what you're looking at from a time range perspective. So that's very important there. Below this chart is what we call our performance ribbon here. So this is my core kind of blue chip portfolio. And so going back 7 years on an annualized basis, I've earned 23% per annum in capital gains, 5 and a bit percent in dividend income. Because of my time horizon and because of sort of my style of investing, I'm not too interested in dividends. Although if you are a dividend investor, Sharesight is just a brilliant tool. I'll get into that in just a bit. Currency gain and then my total return. Currency gain is really quite interesting. Just for illustration purposes, what I'll do, if I change this to in the last month, and brace yourself for some ugly numbers, of course. There's a lot more red on that page. I do that just to show you that the impact of currency and what it can mean for your portfolio. And this is obviously relative to my own sort of investment style. Now, I've lost about 10.5% in capital gains, really made a little bit of money in dividends, but look at the currency gain in my portfolio. over the last month, currency has basically added in 5% to my total return, right? And the reason for that, if I scroll down, that's because I own some Aussie stocks and some American stocks as well. So I'm a dual citizen, so that affords me the option to use a U.S. based broker to purchase shares in U.S. dollars, and I think of that as a bit of a hedge on currency risk as well. And so if you've been tracking the movement of the Aussie dollar versus the U.S. dollar since the pandemic has started, you'll note that the Aussie dollar has fallen quite a ways, and so because of that, my portfolio has been buoyed. And so I just use that as an example here to demonstrate the importance of kind of unpacking your total return in terms of capital performance, distributions, and currency. And now, just to kind of calm myself down, I'll switch that back to since first purchase to have a much healthier looking portfolio. And again, to keep in mind that long-term investing is the way to go, at least in my opinion. I like to opt to not group my investments. There's a whole range of options as to how you can classify things, sector, industry, and so forth. I'll show you that in just a sec. But I like ungrouped. And the reason I like that is because when I log in every day, this gives me one nice table at the bottom. And then what I can do is I can click on the column headers and I can quickly rank and identify sort of who the leaders and the laggards are, right? So I can do that in dollar terms, or I can toggle to percentage gains and do the same thing as well. So you can see that since inception, my investment in Zero has done the best, followed by Apple, followed by an S&P 500 ETF, and so forth. The final thing I'll mention on the overview page is benchmarking. So below the performance metrics down here, we can click Add a Benchmark, right? And this dropdown at the top will pre-select some commonly used benchmarks here, or you can search our database for any benchmark that you wish. So I like to, and of course I can't quite recall the ticker off the top of my head, but what I'll do here, let me just grab the 200, the STW. So we think about benchmarking a little bit differently than maybe what we've been used to. We at Sharesight, we don't think of benchmarking as sort of just the standard price return of the ASX 200 or the Dow or the S&P or the Nasdaq or whatever we've sort of been habituated to think of as the benchmark. We've built this feature to provide you with an apples to apples comparison of a kind of a true Plan B investment alternative. And so what I've just done there, I've added in the STW, which is an ETF that tracks the ASX 200. And what Sharesight does is it goes back to the inception date of your portfolio, and it assumes a common start date and a common investment amount, and then it goes forward across the lifetime of your portfolio to do a true comparison. And so you can see how those two lines now compare, with the orange being my portfolio and the blue being the S&P ASX 200, an ETF that tracks that. The one that I was looking for that I couldn't recall the ticker of is really kind of a multi-sector Vanguard ETF, which I like to use as well. I'm the CEO of a technology business. I've got two little kids. I'm very time poor, so I like to think of a benchmark as a true Plan B alternative. If I have to hand the reins over to somebody else, which fortunately I haven't had to do, as I like to invest myself. So just a couple of notes there on benchmarking. Okay, so another report in terms of performance that I really like is contribution analysis. So again, let's keep a look at our date range here at the top. I'm going to go widen that out to since inception. Now, what this report does, contribution analysis, this shows me the impact of sectors, industries, countries, or markets, and how they've performed and how they've added or detracted from my overall performance. So if I've gone back again to 2013 when I started this portfolio, you can see that electronic technology has far out-contributed based on nearly every other sector. So that's quite interesting, and I have all the data below to support the chart above. But what I really like to do, I like to do not group, so group by do not group. And this will now show me every stock that I've picked as my own kind of private fund manager, and how they've added or detracted from my overall performance, right? And this is all relative to the size of the investment position that you're taking as well, which why in this case, Apple has really been the driver of my performance over the last 7 years. And fortunately, I guess Westpac has been the only one pulling that performance down, either at 2.47% or minus $10,105 over time. So this is a very powerful report that, depending on how you're grouping or not grouping and what time period you're using, you can see the impact of your sort of selection as a portfolio manager. This is also the report that I use with my wife. So I tend to kind of bring her in and have her sit down with me, and I can show her sort of the overall market performance, or the good or bad selections that I've made as our family's portfolio manager. All right. So just quickly looking at a few tax reports. So we have the Taxable Income Report, capital gains, and unrealized CGT. So first what I'll do is let's look at the CGT report. Now I should just mention here too that I assume that most of us joining today are based here in Australia, and you're looking at an Australian Sharesight account, and therefore the CGT reports correspond to the Aussie tax rules. We do offer versions of Sharesight to other tax jurisdictions, so just bear that in mind as I go through this. This is all set up based out of how you set up your portfolio initially when you sign up. So what Sharesight does is it's always listening for your buys and sells, and so we can then easily show you long-term capital gains, discounted cap gains distributions. In this case, this is from this trust, the ETF trust that I own, STW, and capital losses as well, right? And we also show you this nice handy summary on the bottom, which very handily shows you any offsets that you can use to reduce your tax liability at the end of the financial year. One other thing worth mentioning here, we allow you to change your sale allocation method. So as Australian-based investors, we're, I think, the only remaining jurisdiction or kind of major investing jurisdiction in the world that allows investors to change how they treat the parcels when they dispose of shares. You can either do this at the holding level down here or across the portfolio as a whole at the top. And we allow you to set FIFO, LIFO, a preset to maximize, a preset to minimize CGT as well. So if I change this from FIFO to LIFO and update, I'll get a warning there because it might change information I've used to prepare a tax. If you were looking carefully, you'll notice that that now zero has showed up as a short-term capital gain. And that's because I've long held zero and I bought in at stages over the last 7 years. But recently, I tried to do a bit of market timing, which the guys at Team Invest might disagree with. But I bought some zero here on the 12th of March, disposed of it on the 27th, and I made a short-term capital gain as a result. Now, that wouldn't be there had I been using the previous sale allocation methodology, but by manipulating it, I can then change my ultimate tax liability. So this is a very powerful report. And sort of by the same token, unrealized capital gains tax report is essentially the hypothetical gains or losses that you're sitting on. So this is a very powerful what-if report. Shows you short-term cap gains unrealized, long-term unrealized, and capital losses unrealized. And so for many of us, if we're thinking about the sort of the carnage that we've endured lately and some of the losses perhaps that we're sitting on, this may be an opportunity to use some of those losses to offset our tax liability. All right, and the final report in our suite of tax reports is our taxable income report, which is also thought of as just our dividend or distribution report. So again, we're looking at a very wide date range here. I might just change this to last financial year to cut this down. And we show you not only the dividends you've received, but all of the franking components as well. So if we just pop up and say this one from CBA, you can see here that Sharesight captures the franked amount and the franking credits as well. So we receive all that information directly from the ASX, and from other sort of tier one data providers to give you accuracy in dividend reporting. Also, because I've selected a financial year, we have built this income tax return report down at the bottom, which will help you map the dividend and distribution components to the alphanumeric code that the ATO requires as well. And all of this information is exportable to Excel, PDF, or Google Drive. Moving on to the future income report. This shows you dividends that have been announced but have not yet been paid. So again, you can change the date range here, and you can choose to show all or just show, I like to show the monthly totals because it kind of shows me what I'll earn in the upcoming months. And so if this report is looking a bit skinnier to you because of some dividends that have been reduced or outright canceled, you should definitely keep an eye on this one because it may have a material impact on you if you're a yield-based investor, for example. Right. Okay, what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to flip to my technology portfolio, and I'm going to show you quickly how you can use custom groups as well to add some clarity, I guess some kind of personal clarity on how you classify your investments. So this portfolio here is exactly what it sounds like. It's just a portfolio that I own that has technology shares kind of right around the world in it. So you can notice in this case that I've chosen to not group as well because we did that previously in my previous portfolio. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on the drop down here for grouping. I'm going to click on custom groups, and I'm going to select tech. Now, what is a custom group? Well, a custom group, you'll find these, by the way, in account settings by custom groups. This allows you to basically classify all the investments across your Sharesight account in a totally bespoke way, right? So this is our take on asset allocation reporting. Asset allocation reporting, if you follow this, is it's always subject to kind of the style of investor you are or where you're sitting as an investor. A lot of it is really broad, basically equity or bonds or cash. Some of it is a bit more granular. So we kind of thought, well, why don't we just let our user base define how they see the world by just letting them set up their own custom groups. So if I change this, and I'm going to use, again, my tech custom group, what you'll notice is that I now have these kind of homegrown categories that I've punched in on the custom groupings admin page. So I've got China tech, I've got my Bedrock tech. This is the Amazons and Googles and Microsofts of the world, miscellaneous tech, and SaaS tech. SaaS, by the way, is software as a service, which is a subscription software businesses, much like we are. So I have a soft spot for those. So that's just kind of how I see the tech world, and I can apply that to how I track my performance. And the really cool thing is you can take these custom groups and you can apply them to all the reports in a portfolio. So then I can run my contribution analysis report looking at my own bespoke categories. And also you'll notice here, if I just kind of shorten this range a bit, you'll notice here that the that the performance chart is now matching my own customized categories as well. And you can actually toggle some of these off if you want to have just a better look. So there's a lot of flexibility kind of behind the scenes in how you can use the product. Right. All right, now the last kind of main feature that I'll show is our consolidated views. So I'll just jump into create consolidated view. Basically, you give this view a name, you pick a few settings in here as well, and then you select which portfolios you'd like to include. So you can include your own portfolios. If portfolios have been shared with you, you can include those as well. And if I've got this one here just called total invested wealth. Let's go to that. You can see here, it looks pretty much the same as a normal portfolio. There are a few less options though, basically because we only allow for performance reporting at the consolidated view level. And that's just because we assume that this view doesn't correspond to a real tax entity. And so we don't offer the tax reports on here. for that reason. But what you can see is that in my total invested wealth view, shows me the portfolios that I'm using. So this is my, my cores and my satellite. And then again, I can do all the things that I've just shown you, benchmarking and grouping and ranking and all the rest across all of my invested positions. So again, I like to ungroup this one, and I like to just do a big rank, and I can just see exactly what's going on inside my portfolio. And we also identify where these live as well, because a lot of us might have some double ups as well. So we'll identify any common holdings across multiple entities. Right? All right. Oh, the last feature that I'll show you, let me just jump back to my blue chips. We think this feature is especially relevant given what's been going on. If you want to sort of bring in your partner, your spouse, your accountant, advisor, anyone kind of in a trust or an estate, if you want to bring them into kind of what's been going on inside your portfolio, we have a feature, which is, portfolio sharing. It's within settings. And so what this allows you to do, you can punch in a first name, a last name, an email address. You can write a personal message as well if you'd like. And then you can give the access level that you desire too. So read only, which means they can just see what's in your portfolio. Read and write, they can make changes. Or admin gives access to the actual account. This is a great way to share access with your accountant as we approach tax time. So, if you're using Sharesight to get your history in and keep your portfolios up to date, this is a great way to reduce, hopefully, your accounting bills come tax time. And again, it's another great way to share access with your partner or spouse to kind of give them a line of sight as to what's been going on, inside your superannuation account or your portfolio. With that, let me just pause for a second, just to say thank you to everybody for listening in. I will now go to questions. And again, if you want to ask a question, please do so by just clicking on the Q&A button, and you can type in a question, and we'll just run through those there. First question here is Sharesight Apple-friendly? I ask as I've had trouble downloading from my ComSig account. So kind of two questions there. Sharesight is indeed agnostic to any laptop or mobile you may be using. All you need is a browser to run Sharesight. So I'm using Google Chrome. You can use Safari. You can use IE. It'll work just as fine. On the importing from brokers, this can raise questions from our customer base. So the thing to remember with importing from brokers is Sharesight will only be able to import the trade that you've made from that broker. And so if you've done a chest balance transfer from, say, broker A to broker B, and you've only made a couple of trades against those holdings, it will only be able to import those. So it may be that you find you have an incomplete history in there. So that you may then want to go to the broker. You can download the information from the broker and upload that into Sharesight from there. Are franking credits included in income? Yes, they are. So if I go into, I'll just grab CBA. Just go into it. This is the exact same kind of look and feel as the overall portfolio, but at the individual holding level. But in here you can see my trading history. So that was my buy trade, and then you can see all of the dividends come in here as well, including the franking credits. I had another question related to this, which is how do you handle corporate actions? So basically, the way Sharesight works is we license the historical and the ongoing data from the stock exchanges directly, or from, as I mentioned, kind of the best-in-class data providers out there, like the Morningstars of the world. And then we combine your transactions with that data to maintain the portfolio. Where we can, we automate corporate actions. So if I go to Apple, for example, just bear with me as I'm doing this on the fly. You'll see here on Apple, I bought 100 shares of Apple back in 2013. And then the next year there was a share split. So this went from 100 to 600 shares. If you pop that open, it just shows you it was a 1-to-7 share split. This was automatically populated on your behalf. So things like splits and name changes and real basic things where you don't necessarily have to make an election, we can do that for you. If there are complex corporate actions, and this is a really important point that require you as an investor to make a decision, we don't have access to that decision-making process. But what we can allow you to do is to kind of mirror that inside of Sharesight. And so if you open trades or adjustments, you'll see that we have all of the required sort of transaction types in here as well, such as return of capital or a cost-based adjustment that you can use to fix up those corporate actions. We also have down here in holding settings, we have a merge feature as well. So if there's an acquisition or a demerger, this will open a wizard that steps you through how to actually handle those inside the software. And finally, in that same vein, I'll jump back to CDA. This is where you apply dividend reinvestments as well. So if you click turn on, this will give you a warning because it's about to reinvest all those dividends for us. So Sharesight will then automatically reinvest all dividends at the appropriate DRP price on your behalf as well. So keep that in mind. Final point there on corporate actions. Question here, why can you not calculate the last financial year rather than the last 12 months? Yeah, so just on date ranges in general, on the overview page, we have these preset options here. So last 12 months is one that is available here, calendar year. If you change to the performance report, you then have full customization over the date range that you choose, and you can just modify the beginning and the ending dates to render performance there. Question here, is it possible to tag holdings within a single company if they are held in different entities? Oh, that's a good question. I haven't used tagging in a long time, or labels. We do have a labels feature. Let me look. Again, this is very much a live on the fly demo. Jess, feel free to jump in if you know where labels live. Labels, here they are. It's labels. Yeah. So you can apply a label to a holding, and then if you own that holding, say in different portfolios, and you're running a consolidated view, you will then see with a color-coded tag, basically like an inbox email tag, what portfolio that holding belongs to. So you can do that there. It's within the holding page itself. Question here on importing unit trust investments. Good question. So we license the entire universe of managed funds for Australia and other countries from Morningstar. And so you can track those inside of Sharesight. So if I just do this just on the fly now for us, let's say we want to look for, say, Platinum. We have not only the wholesale options, but all the platform options of Platinum as well. No surprise here that Platinum is available on a lot of different platforms. So we then we will then track the daily unit price updates, and we'll also show you the distributions for the unit trusts. What we don't have, however, is an automated way to track the transactions in those managed funds. Quite frankly, a lot of that is sort of the domain of the traditional platform space, which we can be seen as competing with, and some of that is kind of done off market through superannuation, ongoing superannuation contributions as well. So we do have all the data. It is just a manual process to punch in the trades. It's quite simple. I do it for my own stuff on a quarterly basis. I just have a calendar note in my diary, and I just go and I update the number of units that I own in a particular fund within my super there. Cash. So great question on cash. This is probably one of the most commonly asked questions that we've got. And we're about to release a very important new feature on cash. So So just to kind of back up for a second on cash. So Sharesight specifically tracks, listed investments, so shares and ETFs, and as I just mentioned, unlisted managed funds. We also have an option for you to track cash. If you add cash account, um, you can create a manual cash account here by you select the currency and you give it a name, or if you have linked your Sharesight account to a zero account, which is a really, really handy thing to do. Basically, it means that all of your buys and sells and distributions all get pushed into zero automatically, which is wonderful for your accountants again at tax time. Okay, question here on how are share purchase plans handled? Yeah, good question. We've done some blogging and some help articles on this. We don't have an automated way to handle an SPP or an employee share plan, because by nature they're bespoke to the company or to the individual, and there's no kind of sort of on market transaction for that stuff. But what you can do is you can basically mimic it, as my wife does for her own SPP inside of Sharesight, by using opening balances and transactions. So it's manual, but you can track it accurately, just by adding manual transactions to Sharesight. So again, it's just add new holding, and you just go down the manual route here, and then you just update the holding over time as things vested or as more units were added. Question here: if I don't confirm a dividend, is it still added to the return? Yeah, it is. And just a very important point on confirming dividends. You may have noticed in my portfolio here, these numbers here, these orange numbers on the right-hand side. Um, Microsoft, for example, if I just open that, the 4 indicates to me that I have 4 unconfirmed dividends. Now, what do we mean by unconfirmed or confirmed? Um, Again, all the data that we're populating here on your behalf is developed and built based on the information that we license and the information that you've added from our broker connections or manually. And so we just ask that our user base double check all of these transactions, as from time to time there may be a few cents discrepancy here or there. And that can be especially true if something's gone wrong, say way back in time, and you've done a DRP, and then that inaccuracy compounds over time. So we do ask that you confirm. You can confirm by opening up each transaction, each dividend, or you can do that in bulk, confirm automatic transactions here. Right. If you do confirm your dividends as well, you may notice that Sharesight is a lot speedier, because really everything that we do on Sharesight is done on the fly. So all the calculations are done based on what you click and the time periods and all that. So if you confirm those, they're kind of locked away in our database. And if you've got a very large portfolio in terms of number of holdings and trades, you may notice it's a bit speedier. Does Sharesight capture short selling? No, it does not at this stage. Just to kind of add some context around that, I think we'll probably look to develop support in the medium term future for options as opposed to shorts. At least that's on the product roadmap at this time. Do we have an integration with Class Super? No, we don't. But I think we should. Just to be frank about that. Class is a nice piece of software for accountants, for super admin, and Sharesight's a great resource for self-directed investors. So I think an integration between the two would be great. So kind of just leave that at that. My Sharesight account closely resembles my Nabtrade account, but never exactly matches. What are the usual reasons? Yeah, good question here. So I guess to speak broadly about the information you see with the brokers. Brokers, first I would say is have a look at the time periods. So, what exactly is the time period that the broker is showing you, and what exactly is the time period that Sharesight is showing you? If you're talking about individual securities as well, understand when the pricing updates are coming through as well. So Nabtrade would have, depending on the level of customer you are, they'd have real-time prices, whereas Sharesights are 20-minute delayed. That's probably a reason why they don't match. And again, dividends as well. So we actually would have better dividend information than the brokers as well. Most of the brokers would outsource that to the registries as well. Um, Sure. Well, I can't promise you'll be a better investor, but I can promise you'll be a more informed investor. If you're like me and you've got a couple of accounts across brokers and a wife or a partner who has the same, at the very least you can get that information into one place and have a common methodology applied to all of it. And it's particularly strong on the dividend side as well, as I've demonstrated. You'll be more informed, and so hopefully you can make better decisions. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's all about kind of giving yourself the ability and the tools to zoom out and to understand on an apples to apples basis how you've gone over time. I mean, if again going back to that question somebody asked around, what do I see on Nabtrade or my broker? Often, what you'll see is just a very dumbed down return calculation, which is basically the price that I bought something for divided into the price it's trading at today, right? Which makes no reference whatsoever to the cost to enter the investment, like brokerage, makes no reference whatsoever to the impact of dividends, and most importantly, it makes no reference to how long you've owned the asset. And if you're annualizing stuff and you're looking compound performance over time, it really does stack up. Yeah, it's hard, I think, for human beings to kind of come to grips with that, even though it's sort of a very well known mathematical formula. Just to reference, Share Checker is this feature here from the overview page. Um, you can basically whack in any investment that we track. We track, by the way, about 25 stock exchanges around the world. It defaults to ASX here. We do that, and it'll just show me a what if scenario if I bought, say, CSL 2 years ago, including the dividends as well. But yeah, so the request is to then change this to be a totally a bespoke one. That has come up before, and I think we're going to get to it. But look, if you really wanted to pinpoint an exact date a sort of a study on what could have happened, you just run a hypothetical portfolio and punch those holdings in that way, and you'll have full control and then the full feature set on Sharesight to track that stuff. Yes. So that's always a very interesting topic. I think the two that have just come out this week, or the one that's come out this week, we've just launched a referral program, which we will allow our customers to, if they refer the product to their friends, they will build up credits that they can use to discount their subscription. You'll see that. I think I've got it in my account now, actually. Just a little preview. So this is, yeah, refer a friend there. The other one is the big one is the cash accounts, as I mentioned. So adding the ability for investors to track the dividend impact, track those dividends into the cash accounts, and then maintain those as a balance inside their portfolio as well, as I think will be a major enhancement for the user base. Mm, that's a really good point, actually. I hadn't thought about that. The one um, the one thing I would add is that sometimes if you log out and log back in and clear your cookies and all that, that can all be erased. We've all experienced that. But I can have a chat to the guys about that and take it back. I guess on any kind of features that look, I may sound waffly on or don't have an answer. The reality is that anything is possible. It just needs kind of the user base to get behind it, and the best way to do that is to go to the help tab and go to the community. And if you post an idea in there, or you'll search for a pre-existing idea and kind of upvote it or comment on it, our product manager Ben is in there every day looking at this stuff. So if it's something that is something obvious that you think we should do, please sing out in the community and let us know. Um, without without kind of jumping into the actual portfolio to kind of diagnose what's going on. The chart I think that the person is talking about here is the growth chart here. Let's open that. This chart is useful. However, the one thing that's a bit, in my opinion, less than ideal about this chart is the way that it selects the time periods down here. Just to be honest, you can see I had no control. I can control the kind of the overall start date and end date up here, but when I've done the growth chart here, you can see it's showing me 7 April to 6 August, 7 April to 6 August, 7. It's kind of selected as many time periods as it can fit in there programmatically, and it just may be that if you add the figures from the dividends from in what's this blue bar in mine, it doesn't exactly match the taxable income report because the chart just can't fit it in. But I guess when in doubt, I would always go with the data on the taxable income report over the chart, because the chart is trying to kind of take some I guess some shortcuts to kind of show you information quickly and efficiently. Yeah, so we use Amazon Web Services to store data. It's hosted right around the world. I can just say that everything is encrypted, and we're using kind of best-in-class security protocols to store and protect the information. And for that reason, we kind of just don't comment on our security standards and protocols unless we're kind of specifically asked by a user, and we can have kind of a private dialogue with them. So somebody asked, can you please explain more on the minimize CGT function? Yeah, that one is complex. What I would say, it's in reports, capital gains tax report. And again, to modify this, it's the change sale allocation method. This portfolio is not too exciting, and I think this is the blue chips portfolio over this date range. But basically, if you set the minimize CGT, it'll basically go through all of the parcels that you own in a particular holding. We call it a collective. And it'll arrange it in such a way that it reduces your capital gains tax exposure as much as possible. So often we'll have accountants use the software, and they'll say, "Oh, I like Sharesight, but I want to do the parcel selection that I used to do on my spreadsheet or whatever." And we always argue that actually this is parcel selection. We're just automating it for you. That's what it is, sort of in conversational tones. Again, if you go to our help page and search for the CGT report, you'll find examples and a more, I would say, academic explanation on how we actually do it. Question here. Can you please explain more on how holdings from a previous broker can be edited if they were transferred broker to broker in a portfolio? Yeah, well, I would say that, I mean, first and foremost, even when you set up a portfolio, you're always free to edit the holdings that are in that portfolio, or rewrite history, basically. So what I would do if you're talking across multiple brokers, I would just do it sequentially. I would go to the first broker, which is your oldest broker, and I would import that data into Sharesight, either through our broker connections or just download your trading history into a CSV file and upload that into Sharesight, and then do the same thing for the second broker. And that way you'll have continuity of holdings. Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it. You could do that in kind of two separate Sharesight portfolios, and you can combine them, or just do that right in the same portfolio. As I mentioned before, you can import holdings from any number of brokers into one portfolio entity on Sharesight. But I would do it kind of in the sequential order that you actually maintain the brokerage accounts. Question here: how do you incorporate unlisted investments? Assume they're manually entered. Yes. So here, just to show you that, let's just add a holding manually, and you'll note this link here: add a custom investment. So now you can do code, name, and then here's this description. So if you do fixed interest, and you just say BND for bond, I'm just kind of riffing here. You can then set the face value, the coupon rate, the frequency, and the payment dates, and you can do this automatically. So if it's a bond, this will automatically pay you interest into your portfolio as well. That's just one example of doing a what we call a custom investment. Um, does the system manage options trading? Not at this stage, but it is on our roadmap for kind of the medium termish future. Um, let's see here. As a dual citizen, U.S. and Australia, as I am too, to the question asker, is it possible to stop or not subtract the IRS withholding tax? Um, I think this is the on a particular investment. This would be the W8BEN thing. I can speak to that from my own personal experience. We assume that you have done the work to already do that. So we assume that everyone's filed that with the IRS, so to speak. So that's just kind of the default position we take. And then a question here on what are the subscription fees? So broadly speaking, just go to sharesight.com and you can see our lineup of plans and pricing. But to talk through it, we offer a free plan, which gives you access to 10 holdings, a good number of the reports. The really nice thing about the free plan is you can maintain it for as long as you wish. There's no time limit. You can really give it a shot, find out if it's right for you. If you've got a kind of basic investment requirements, you're welcome to just use the free plan for as long as you like. And we'd like to just give you the tools to make an informed decision if you do decide you want to upgrade. The first premium package starts at $15 per month, then it goes to 25, and then 39. The differences there between those plans are the number of portfolios you can track and the number of holdings. So in the starter plan, which is $15 per month, you can track up to 20 holdings. And then if you move to the investor and the expert plan, the $25 and $39 plans, you have no limit on the holdings you can track, and they afford you the option to track 3 and 5 portfolios respectively. The investor plan is by far and away our most popular plan. That gives you access to 3 portfolios with unlimited holdings. And if you do purchase it annually in advance, we will reduce the cost by 1 month. So there's a bit of savings in there too. And in most cases, for most people, the cost of Sharesight is also tax deductible too. So just worth mentioning. But please check with your accountant as well. And the last question I'll take here, just in the interest of time, where you have discrepancies between the Sharesight dividends and the actually paid into your account, what reasons or have been short paid by the company? I don't think you've been shortchanged by the company. I wouldn't assume that. Again, keep in mind that the data that we're licensing here is combined with the trading data that you've input into the system to produce those dividends. And so we always tell people to go back and check the actual cash accounts for the real dividend and the real sort of taxable income value. And the other thing I would note too is that every company actually has the ability to set rules on dividends. So, every listed company will work with their registry to determine the rules around rounding for things like DRPs and who gets paid first. And often that can result in us kind of DIY investors having a few cents out from what the actual listed dividend was. Those are typically the main reasons for any discrepancies you may see. But again, check with your actual bank account for the real amount. And you can always go into Sharesight and modify those dividends or have your accountant do it to get them to be hyper accurate. Right. So with that, I'll just stop there because we've been going for about an hour and 10 minutes. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I know that a lot of our lives have been interrupted at best and turned upside down by what's been going on out there. And look, we really do appreciate you taking the time to spend about an hour with us on a Tuesday. We know that we've got a lot of things going on in our lives, and our mission is to help you get the most out of our software. So again, just want to say thank you and thank you everybody very much, and have a nice afternoon.